today we are going to be reading through all of the trivia for Dagon. Dagon? I'm still pretty sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. Just because I think these facts are kind of interesting. Lovecraft's letters. As to letters, my case is peculiar. I write such things exactly as easily and as rapidly as I would utter the same topics in conversation. Indeed, epistolary expression is with me largely, replacing conversation. As my condition of nervous prostration becomes more and more acute, I cannot bear to talk much now, and am becoming as silent as the spectre himself. My loquacity extends itself on paper. H.P. Lovecraft to Reinhard Kleiner, December 23rd, 1917. Throughout his life, Lovecraft penned around 100,000 letters to his friends and fans, out of which about 10 survived to this day. But his tendency to endlessly correspondence was a relatively late growth. In youth, I scarcely did any letter writing. Thanking anybody for a present was so much of an ordeal that I would rather have written a 250-line pastoral or a 20-page treatise on the rings of Saturn. Selected letters 1929 through 1931. Lovecraft would often skip meals to afford postage. Collections of his correspondence have been published in various books, and selected letters can be found online. Some readers consider them his most important legacy. Morphine entered into use in the 19th century and was routinely administered to treat severe pain during the American Civil War, 1861 through 1865, and World War I, 1914 through 1918. It was also sold without any restrictions until 1914. Morphine became more popular after the invention of the hypodermic syringe around 1854. I still can't pronounce his name. Who first isolated the substance, originally named it morphinum after Morpheus, the Greek god associated with dreams. At the time when Dagon was published, morphine abuse, known as soldier's disease, already posed a big problem in the United States. Lovecraft and the Great War. Dagon was written around a month after the United States entered World War I. Lovecraft was actively interested in its course. He composed many poems in which he gave encouragement to soldiers and commented on the events unfolding in Europe. He tried to enlist in the army, which he mentions in one of the letters to Reinhard Kleiner. Some time ago, impressed by my entire uselessness in the world, I resolved to attempt this enlistment despite my almost invalid condition. I argued that if I chose a regiment soon to depart for France, my sheer nervous force, which is not inconsiderable, might sustain me till a bullet or piece of shrapnel could more conclusively and effectively dispose of me. But even though he passed the physical exam, his mother prevented him from going to the war. She has threatened to go to any lengths, legal or otherwise, if I do not reveal all the ills which unfit me for the army. I am Providence, the life and ends and times of H.P. Lovecraft. The Huns. The Huns were Central Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. They were known as brutal, deadly warriors and masters of quick raids who also developed powerful composite bows, lassos, and early siege weapons. During World War I, the British used the word Hun as a synonym for Germans in order to emphasize their brutality. However, the term originated when the German Emperor Wilhelm II gave a speech to his troops on 27th July 1900 before they embarked to China. Should you encounter the enemy, he will be defeated. No quarter will be given, prisoners will not be taken. Whoever falls into your hands is forfeited. Just as 1,000 years ago, the Huns, under their king Attila, made a name for themselves, one that even today makes them seem mighty in history and legend. May the name German be affirmed by you in such a way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare to look cross-eyed at a German. The refusal to take prisoners was a clear breach of the laws and customs of war adopted during the First Hague Convention of 1899. The return to short stories. Dagon was written in July 1917 and first published in 1919 in The Vagrant, an amateur magazine focused on the supernatural. The story is the first of his stories that introduced an element from the Cthulhu mythos. Dagon itself. A pagan cult worshipping Dagon later appears in the shadow over Innsmouth, one of Lovecraft's most popular works. 1917 is also the year when he wrote The Tomb, a story about Jervis Dudley, a daydreamer who discovers a mysterious mausoleum in the woods by his house and becomes obsessed with it. These two works marked Lovecraft's return to short story writing after he burned most of his attempts at the genre 9 years prior and decided to concentrate on poetry. Lovecraft stated that it was his friend William Paul Cook, a literary publisher and critic, who convinced him to start writing weird fiction again. The origins of Dagon. Dagon seems to be inspired by Fishhead, a short novel by Ivan S. Cobb about unnatural affinities between a hybrid idiot and the strange fish of an isolated lake. Supernatural horror in literature, H.P. Lovecraft. And Lovecraft's dream about a strange island emerging from the ocean and him crawling in the ooze that covered its surface. I dreamed that whole hideous crawl, and yet feel the ooze sucking me down. In defense of Dagon, H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft's interest in the topic stemmed from his aversion to fish and sea smells. In his own words, I have hated fish and feared the sea and everything connected with it since I was 2 years old. But I cannot recall what earlier experience gave me such a profound and lasting aversion to the sea and seafood. The Dweller in the Darkness, Lovecraft, 1927. The Mystery of Volcanic Islands. Volcanic eruptions sometimes result in the creation of islands. Most of them are transient and erode after some time, but some prove permanent. The floating permanents, prosperous rock created when superheated pressurized rock is ejected from a volcano, can move across long distances and transport barnacles and macroalgae that cling to it. In 2001, rafts of pumice created during the eruption of a volcano near Tonga, Polynesia, eventually reached Australia. The Horrors of the Ocean. The creator of the Cthulhu mythos and the fictional underwater city of Ryle was convinced that life could not exist at the bottom of the ocean because the water pressure would make it uninhabitable. Today we know that the darkest depths of the ocean are homes to many peculiar organisms. The deepest dwelling fish we have discovered so far, the marina snailfish, can live about 8,000 meters, more than 26,000 feet, below the ocean's surface, in never-ending darkness and at hellishly crushing pressures, hundreds of times stronger than those found at sea level. Upon glancing at the modern photos of deep-sea creatures such as the anglerfish, the fangtooth, or the viperfish, and their truly Lovecraftian characteristics, it is hard not to find some irony in this. The Loner. Contrary to popular opinion, Lovecraft was not an ever-frowning, eccentric, grumpy loner. He considered himself to be a person who appreciated humor. Moreover, he would often meet with his friends in his apartment or at various cafes in Brooklyn and Manhattan. At times, his social life was so intensive his work would suffer for months. There was a point when he finally decided he needed to put an end to daily meetings and loitering in New York cafeterias and resorted to hiding at home and reading with the main room light turned off, pretending he wasn't there whenever a friend knocked at his door. He also had another method of deterring his guests, which involved greeting them in a bathrobe, with an unmade bed visible in the background and piles of paper scattered across the floor. Storytelling methods. Dagon contains many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through carvings at the Mountains of Madness, the Nameless City, journals and character notes, The Shadow Out of Time, The Haunter of the Dark, Islands Emerging from the Ocean, The Call of Cthulhu, or fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies. Mago and the Whispers of Darkness is also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also conclude in a manner similar to Dagon, but let's skip the details in order not to spoil the ending. The Piltdown Man. Lovecraft would often use the latest scientific discoveries as inspirations for his work. He would even update his stories at the last moment in order to make sure they reflected the latest breakthroughs. Unfortunately, this method was not without its flaws. After Lovecraft's death, the Piltdown Man discovery mentioned in Dagon turned out to be a paleontological fraud. That's a long word. In 1912, Charles Dawson, an amateur archaeologist, announced that he had discovered the missing link between ape and man, the fossilized remains of a previously unknown early human. Years later, they turned out to be a forgery, but by that point, the fraud had already managed to negatively affect the early research on human evolution. In the year when discovery took place, the majority of the scientific community believed Dawson indeed found the missing link. In 1953, Time magazine published evidence proving that Dawson was a con man. It turned out that the fossils of the previously unknown early human consisted. In 1953, Time magazine published evidence proving that Dawson was a con man. It turned out that the fossils of the previously unknown early human consisted of a human skull, the jaw of an orangutan, and chimpanzee teeth. The journalist. Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of amateur journalism. In 1915, he started publishing his own journal called The Conservative, which included political and social commentary, poetry, short stories, and literary criticism written by him and other authors. Howard was a skilled wordsmith, but he also took criticisms to heart, which resulted in his decision to step away from writing poetry and concentrate on weird fiction again. For the first time since his teenage years, Dagon, published in 1919, is one of the short stories written during that period. In this example excerpt from The Conservative, the master of horror fiction explains his attitude towards warfare and the idea of world peace. Why any sane human being can believe in the possibility of universal peace is more than the conservative can fathom. Should the entire civilized world agree simultaneously to disarm, one or more nations would undoubtedly retain secret armaments and at the proper time take advantage of their more altruistic and less astute contemporaries in a wild career of conquest against unarmed victims. No country is or ever can be above warfare until the basic impulses of the human animal shall have miraculously changed. The atheist. Lovecraft considered himself an atheist and absolute materialist, which he attributed partly to his early childhood interest in astronomy and science in general in his own words. I am, indeed, an absolute materialist so far as actual belief goes, with not a shred of credence in any form of supernaturalism, religion, spiritualism, transcendentalism, metapsychosis, or immortality. All I say is that I think it is damned unlikely that anything like a central cosmic will, a spirit world, or an eternal survival of personality exist. They're the most preposterous and unjustified of all the guesses which can be made about the universe. And I am not enough of a hair splitter to pretend that I don't regard them as arrogant and negligible moonshine. In theory, I am agnostic, but pending the appearance of radical evidence, I must be classed, practically and provisionally, as an atheist. In defense of Dagon. In 1921, Lovecraft released a series of 3 essays. The defense reopens, the defense remains open, and final words. Later published as a collection titled In Defense of Dagon, in which he rebuked a series of criticisms directed at his works. Here's some notable quotes. I paint what I dream, and I will let the public settle the rest amongst themselves. Mr. Monday asked the raison d'etre of Dagon. I will give it purely and simply to reproduce a mood. Its object is the simplest in all art, portrayal. The physical horrors of war, no matter how extreme and unprecedented, hardly have a bearing on the entirely different realm of supernatural terror. Ghosts are still ghosts. The mind can get more thrills from unrealities than from realities. In the essays, Lovecraft touches upon the topics of atheism, materialism, the quest for truth, and the love of science. Dagon. Dagon was the main deity of the Filipinos who worshipped throughout the Middle East as the ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad chose him as the patron saint of their war conquest. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in an Assyrian poem, in an underworld prison warder in one of the Babylonian texts. He is often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to these wrong interpretations of his name, as in Hebrew the word Dagon means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft's works, Dagon as an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that resides in the ocean. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Historic Order of Dagon. August Derleth in the Cthulhu mythos. August Derleth was an American writer and an anthologist. He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works through his company Arkham House. Although he greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's works after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of his most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. Derelith was a devout Catholic to the Cthulhu mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misinterpreted in today's culture. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu mythos was coined by Derelith after the author left the mortal plane. The Marketeer. Lovecraft's attempts to find a job in 1925 were influenced by his advice he received from friends. Among others, he started freelancing for a marketing magazine, where he would write announcements and commercials. Feel free to judge his copywriting skills for yourself. From an ad for Curtis Woodwork. Curtis Woodwork embraces both the usual structure units and cleverest contrivances of built-in or permanent furniture, such as bookcases, dressers, buffets, and cupboards. Every model is conceived and created with the purest art, ripest scholarship, and mellowest craftsmanship, which energetic enterprise can command, and made to conform rigidly to the architecture of each particular type of home. The cost, considering the quality, is amazingly low, and a trademark in the individual pieces prevents any substitution by careless contractors. Scientist. These days, the word scientist is a widely accepted term, but at the time Dagon was published, it was subject to a wide debate. After the author used it in his story, critics pointed out that man of science was a more appropriate term to employ. He admitted, in defense of Dagon, that if Dagon were to be reprinted, he would indeed use the phrase they suggested. Scientist was coined as an analog to artist, to be used when referring to those studying different branches of science. Yet, in the 19th and early 20th century, scientific researchers in Great Britain and the United States were of the opinion that man of science, resembling the term man of letters, was the only proper choice. Among other things, it was gender specific, indicating that science was an endeavor to be pursued only by one sex. The term scientist became more accepted only after World War II, and man of science started fading into obscurity as an old-fashioned synonym. Lovecraft on tobacco and alcohol. Lovecraft hated tobacco, even though he used to smoke when he was 12, in order to look and feel like an adult. In his correspondence with friend Reinhard Kellner, he claims that he quit as soon as he started wearing long pants. He also had a very strong opinion about alcohol, as evidenced by his letter to Zelia Brown, dated 13th of February 1928. As for the matter of drinking, I have never tasted intoxicating liquor and never intend to, having a strong aesthetic disgust at anything which blunts or coarsens the delicate and natural pose of the evolved human intellect and imagination. Drinking excited my personal repugnance, hence I don't drink. Let the herd do what they will. I am rather in favor of prohibition. The prohibition of any one antisocial force as well as any other. Elder sign. At another house where people were stirring, he asked questions about the gods, and whether they danced often upon Laren. But the farmer and his wife would only make the elder sign and tell him the way to Near and Uthlar, the dream quest of an unknown Kadath. H.P. Lovecraft. Elder sign is a protective symbol that can be found in various works of pop culture, usually represented by a 5-pointed star with an eye flame symbol in its center. For example, in games inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's writing, it is supposed to ward away all kinds of cosmic horrors. However, this is a later version of the sign, created by the author's friend, writer August Derleth. In our game, we have used the original symbol as designed by Lovecraft, in the form of a 6-pointed branch, which he sometimes included in letters to his friends. So that's what these are. Alright, everyone. Thank you for watching this. For now, that's the last of this game. As you can see, there's 2 other parts, but I don't have the DLC for that. If this video and the first video of the playthrough of this visual novel gets enough likes, I may buy the DLC if y'all really want to see it. But this video and the previous one has to get enough likes. Heck, at this point, if I can even get 1,000 likes, I'll buy one of the DLCs and we'll go through it. See if y'all can make that happen for me. I hope y'all enjoyed. I know I stuttered a lot. I'm not sure what game I'm going to do after this one quite yet. As for posting schedule, guaranteed videos every Wednesday. Possible extra videos on Saturdays if I can fit it into my schedule. The recording and the editing takes time to do. So, and since I process my videos up to 4K so everyone can see them as clearly as possible, that takes even longer. Check out my art, my animations. If you're interested in seeing me stream at all, I stream on Twitch under Starlight Alchemist 1 with the same profile picture. I look forward to seeing y'all all again later, and thank you so much for the support. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.